All right, welcome to the database team weekly meeting. Jump right into it. So I wanted, unless anybody else had any topics I want to talk about first, I was going to run through the issues and look at deliverable labels. All right. So we have 30 issues overall in this milestone, and I filtered out the ones that already had deliverables on them. We can go back and review them again if it makes sense, but I wanted to run through the ones that did not have deliverable. It looks like Andreas, you added a couple in the last couple hours, so we'll just go top to bottom there, not in any particular order. Oh, I guess they're by created date order. So do you think this one will be done, this milestone?
Oh, wait, those are the ones that are not deliverable, right?
Correct, yeah. We have not put the deliverable label on these.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, those should be fixed in this milestone. Insert, this is stupid. I mean, I've set a statement timeout in GDK, and I was a bit naive in thinking that the 15 seconds will work everywhere, and it doesn't. And the last one of the things that popped up was the mass insert seeding that just doesn't work with that, obviously. So I gotta fix that. Same goes for the second one.
All right. What about this one? It's not assigned to anybody, and it's created by Jose.
There is another issue that should go in before that, I think. So we have two issues there. One is implementing the Rubocop to prevent new tables without the primary key, and then the second one is to fix the existing ones.
Do you have that issue handy?
Yeah, that's marked as a deliverable, so that's why you don't see it there.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like this one has a dependency on the other one. Do we want to mark this one as deliverable as well, or not, since there's a dependency blocking it? It's not assigned, and we have about 2.5 weeks left. Yeah, just under 3 weeks left. Anybody think they'll pick it up in this milestone? Okay, let's leave it. Next one, snapshot analysis. Opened and assigned to yourself, Andreas.
Yeah, I put it on the side for the reindexing. But if I manage to get this done this week, then I'll pick that up again.
Okay.
It's also my OKR, so I should pick it up, I guess.
Probably. All right, let's see, connect timeout applied twice. Priority 4, sub 4, doesn't look like it's on fire for this milestone. This is probably considered a stretch then.
Probably.
All right, Giannis?
Yep, I have added a deliverable on that.
Okay. Rubocop. Is this the one you were just talking about? No, it's a different one. Discourage catching canceled, query canceled exceptions. This is a stretch for 13.
It's not terribly important. It's just a funny pattern that we saw. You might want to prevent that.
Okay. Materialize issue, another stretch.
Yeah, it's not that we have a problem with it, but this changes with Postgres 12, so this is something we should look into at some point.
Okay, but not critical for this milestone. Load balancing breaks when no replicas are available.
I think somebody else outside our team was picking that one up. You can follow up with that. But it's, again, not something that is too important.
Okay. Giannis.
We will see. This
Okay.
is a doc update.
Yep.
Most probably, yes.
This one we're blocked. I know that there's progress on the UX, but we can't mark it as deliverable if we have a dependency. Same on that one. Container registry, that's about the data dictionary, so it's a nice to have. This one, we've identified the common themes, right? Like not having production-like data, but we're working through a solution now. We're throwing out ideas for solutions, so not a deliverable. This one was created by Grant, and I don't think anybody's looked at this one, so we'll just leave it as it is. Let's see, proposal for events partitioning.
We should work on it. I want to finish I have 4 or 5 MRs that I want to finish, and then I will work on that.
Okay. Document design decision. Validate GitLab.com database schema. That you're working on that now, Pat, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think we should try to get that one done.
Okay. Good. I don't know what she said, but I heard singing. Okay, so now we have 18 deliverable in the milestone. Cool, thank you. And so I want to quickly recap the vertical MR discussion. Thanks for everybody's feedback. There were a couple good sentences and summaries in there. I think it was Andreas said we want to see the database change along with the backend code that makes use of it. And then Andreas spelled out an even more detailed summary here. Wait for it. There it is. Basically, my takeaway from that is the MR has changed quite a bit. At the beginning, it was fairly prescriptive, saying, you know, it must be a vertical MR instead of horizontal slicing. But now it has backed off the strong wording and is basically saying ensure that all context is included. And I think that's what you all were saying in your feedback, right? Make sure it's not horizontal sliced. And if it requires back-end code, then make sure that's included with the MR. So I think that falls under the ensure all context is included summary that is now written in the MR. So I think we're good there on that discussion. Did I miss the general gist of what everybody was given for feedback? Okay, thanks. That was a great conversation. I will close out that issue. And then I don't know if anybody's had time to take a look at it. Nick gave his feedback on what we've been talking about for testing migrations. He just posted it a couple hours ago, so take a look. We can continue the conversation there. Audit events, like I said, they have some MRs. There were updates as of about 15 minutes ago, so they're still working on the UX. So we can switch it over. And then I'm not sure. I think it was Andreas. Did you put these FYI topics in?
Yeah, we don't have to talk about them if we. You know, I just wanted to mention those. I found those interesting conversations about like how to implement the retention strategy using partitions, and also somebody was asking about materialized views, if we can use them, and just wanted to drop those links.
Okay. And we haven't actually had a full team meeting in a while because folks have been out for the last couple of weeks. So we haven't had goals for a while. So what are the goals for this week? What are folks trying to accomplish?
I want to get all the MRs for the migration helpers out. There are 4 issues right now, or 5. I don't remember. I think that there are 4. So I want all the MRs to be out, and then start working on so that I'm free to work on the events partitioning. So yeah.
Can I help you with the reviews of those MRs? Or so
Yeah.
feel free to ping me for
Yeah,
this.
one will come your way in after Patrick is done.
Right.
And then, yeah.
Cool. Andreas?
I'd like to get the reindexing workout. It's kind of close so that we can actually enable the cron job. So the cron job is the last step. Bit dependent here on SREs though and Omnibus, but could work out this week.
Right. Pat?
Yeah, I want to wrap up the documentation for the partitioning. And the other is for the schema validation, I think, I identified what the differences are. I think like to have, strategy on how we're going to fix each of those various types of differences so I can start implementing. I think some will be maybe tricky to think about how we want to kind of rectify those differences in a way that doesn't break anything.
I cover everything for the week. So, question on one of the issues. I should have left it open. The data dictionary plans that we have in the future. We talked about. We have some ideas on how we want to start commenting on those, so that we have comments on the tables and the columns. And we're in the process of rolling out the container registry database. Is it too much to ask that they start doing that implementation of comments on columns and tables? I can find that mouse in that issue while we're talking. Do you think it will add too much work?
I don't know about their workload, so you should ask them. But I think what we need to do is sort of suggest a strategy for documenting things.
Mm-hmm.
And an easy one is to say like, well, please comment on columns and tables. The other sort of idea that we had was that we could use that free text, those free text comments, and put some more structured data in there. Like, for example, we discussed about attributing your backend group to, or sort of indicating who owns the table.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a more structured way of providing the documentation. You can put this still into the comment, but it sort of needs some format and structure. And we haven't really discussed this yet, I think.
Okay. Do you think the first step is to maybe add some documentation around this, encouraging folks to use this structure here? And is this the right structure?
Yeah, that's kind of the question also for container registry. There is one team that owns full service, which is really good. So it's pretty clear who owns stuff, so maybe that's not even needed.
Sorry, say that again.
I was saying that for container registry, it's a bit different than for GitLab Rails. Because there is only one team that owns that. So maybe the important part is that they add their intentions, how to use those tables, and describe that. Yeah. We can always use a different format later if you want to.
Yeah. I know the data team was interested in getting some kind of data dictionary from container registry, since it's a new database, and they wanted to know how to best import the statistics so that they could measure it while they import it. So that's the only reason I was thinking container registry, because it's new. They're still working on the schema now, and this might be something they can easily get in. but it sounds like there's still some question on, is this the right structure we have now? Or were you saying earlier, let's just go with the structure we have. We can always change it later since this is an isolated database.
It would kind of be interesting to, if there is any more sort of structure that we can find or need to find. And I haven't seen enough from the data team what they are actually expecting to get. So is it just like, I would just see free text comments from developers on tables and columns? That's easy. You just add comments. That's a no-brainer in that sense. But if they want to have more information or more structured information on that, I think we would have to discuss that a bit more in more detail.
I think that this whole discussion started because the data team tries to load data to Snowflake and create reports. And I think that the origin of this discussion was because they tried to implement a feature, a dashboard. And it took something like a week for them to figure out and the business logic and how things work. It was one of the complicated parts of the core GitLab.com GitLab database. So I think that what they need is more of a guide of what's there, what's the business logic. And I think that whatever we expose through APIs is already pretty much documented. Everything else is like, so I assume that's something that will help a data analyst understand what's the logic. I don't think that we can have all the logic in a field, but you know, sometimes it's like why it is unique or what's the. Also, what's the team that is responsible for the table? It's like doing a blame over the feature. So
Yeah.
now what's the.
Yeah, and that's what Kathleen described as what they needed. You know, if they get a table in and they have, the table is not self-describing, right? You have some odd columns in there and you can't just look at it and go, what is this used for? They like in this example, they'll have the owner. They know which team to go and ask, hey, what are these columns for? And if there's no, and that's only if there's no description, because right now they have no idea who to ask. Kathleen often comes to me directly like, hey, do you know who owns this table now? Or even pings in the channel. So this would help. And then, you know, question she had recently, like, what is this column used for? And having these comments on there would certainly help. And she took a look at this and she liked the structure. And she said this would solve a lot of the problems that they are running into when they're doing data import or trying to do some analysis and they just don't know what the content is. So I think this suggestion that you made in a different conversation that I pasted here, I think this would be a really good start.
Does it make sense to use JSON for comment? Should we use something else?
I think it makes sense. I mean, we use it elsewhere, right? And we use JSON in the database. It's as good a structure as any other. And like you said, if this doesn't work, we can try some other format later on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's better than free text, right? It gives a structure. If we're doing owner and description, that gives at least 2 fields the data team can start analyzing.
Mm-hmm.
We will also have a binary field and add the photo of the developer that added the table.
A video description of what the table is used for. All right.
There's the slight risk coming from that, and it's always the case with like data warehouse loads and all that. If you connect directly to the database, you're basically making that an interface, right? So right now we have
into what?
You make the database an interface to the outside world, and right now, basically, as a developer or a team owning things, you have the freedom to change that because it's just an internal thing to your application. So it's good that we start documenting that. The other question you could ask, and I'm sure they also have, is like, how do they know when these things change over time? Like when we ship a migration that breaks those assumptions or changes that documentation, how do they know that, or you know, how do we communicate about those things? Because then these things start to get to become an interface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we probably need to give some examples on implementation when you're creating a migration, right? How do you add, update, delete these comments?
Yeah, for GitLab Rails, I think we will probably add a migration helper for that. We have helpers to add a comment, but maybe we want to make them more structured for this. It's just a convenience thing, basically. For the container registry, I would think it's just plain SQL, so they probably don't need that.
Is there
we
anything?
Start with a comment per table and think about adding a comment per column afterwards, because it's a bit too much work.
For Rails or for container registry?
In general. Or yeah, the container registry is so simple, it's so small that it's okay. There is already a document, the document that you have prepared, that most probably provides anything that anyone wants. Because from a data analyst perspective, I think that what you want is to understand the schema. So, for example, in this case, there is the schema there is the AR diagram, there is a discussion. So any comment the word, I don't think inside the database won't help anymore. And if we had, for example, full documentation for every table, it would be enough, but we cannot have that at the GitLab level at the moment.
How do we?
That's why I talked about the API, because the API is a form of documentation over our, even though it's not one-to-one, but there is a lot of documentation of how things work with it.
So how would someone that's new to the data analysis team know where to find the documentation that we've already talked about with container registry? I think that's where the table comment would help, right? You just link to the issue, the documentation, whatever conversation that we've had, so that they have one place they can go look.
I felt those documents, well, this one in particular, this is good for development. I think when you're working in container registry and you'd like to understand why certain choices were made or so, for the schema documentation itself, I think it would be better if we kept all that information in the code base, because this is where it lives, right? The document is going to be outdated, it probably already is, right? So I think putting that into the schema makes it very close to what you're changing. If you're dropping that column, well, the documentation will be gone anyways, and you don't have to think about that. But that kind of assumes that we can put all the information that we want in those comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the example you just gave where you drop in a column, the column comment will be fairly brief, right? This is like these examples here. I would imagine maybe the table comment could point somewhere else. If you had like the container registry documentation, you could just have a link to where that documentation happened, or it could be a simple description like this.
Or there is a markdown document for the documentation in the container registry project itself, and you can reference that so that it lives in the same kind of place.
Yes. The repository should be the single source of truth. That's true.
Is that going to stay up to date though? So like if you're in the code and you're changing columns or whatever, using this process here would make sure that it's up to date, right? But if you have a separate markdown document that's acting as a data dictionary in this case, I could see that getting out of sync pretty quickly.
I think that it's a matter of policy. I agree that this is better, but it's like we ask for every migration, every MR that has a migration to have a change log. A changelog is a separate file, and you do not approve an MR without a changelog, for example. If the policy, the process is that if you have a migration that changes the database, you must also change schema.sql or whatever we are going to schema description. So it's not like.
Yeah, I think that should be a part of this as well, regardless of what the final outcome of this data dictionary is. Okay, maybe we just think about it and continue to talk about this one asynchronously. It's not critical for 13.5, but I know the data team really likes this idea and would like to see some progress on it. So if you have any more thoughts or ideas, just feel free to add them here. I think we've covered everything on the agenda. Anything else anybody wants to cover? Nope. All right. I'm gonna go feed the kids then. See y'all later.
All right.
Thank you.